Hey everyone, it's Miss Teresa this gorgeous August afternoon. I am so excited to be back with you. I had a little bit of a break because we were camping and our internet signal was not the best. So I haven't done these videos here for quite a few weeks, but I am so excited to be back with you. I hope that you're having an amazing summer so far. I know it feels like it's going really fast. So I hope that you guys are hanging on to every last minute of it. And that you guys are enjoying all this beautiful weather while we have it. And you're making some great summer memories. I know this summer looks a lot different than our normal summers, but I still see that you guys are doing some great things. Some of you guys have gone camping. Some of you have been able to play on baseball, small little leagues. So I know that you guys are still doing some fun things, even though things look a lot different. So I hope that you're having a great time and enjoying these last few weeks before school. Well, I am coming to you this afternoon to give you a recap of what Pastor Kyle talked about this morning at 10:30 back on our main Facebook page, where he did our study of Daniel today. So he did a sermon this morning on Daniel. Now, for those of you who don't know who Daniel is, he is a guy and he is an Israelite. And he lived with his family and his friends in their country. And then one day, a king from another nation and country came and they captured all of the Israelites. And they took them away to Babylon. That's where the king was from. And so Pastor Kyle talked about David and his friends. Now, David had a couple of friends. And his friends' names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those are some Israelite names. And so Daniel and his friends were taken away by the king and moved to a whole new country. They had to leave everything that they knew, everything that was familiar to them. Now, when they were there in the new country, not only did the king want them to work for him, but he decided, the king did, to change their names. And so to Daniel, he changed his name to Belshazzar. That's a big change, isn't it, from Daniel? And Hananiah's name became Shadrach. Mishael's name became Meshach. And Azariah's name became Abednego. And so the king changed their names and also changed a lot of things about them. He had them eat he wanted them to eat some different foods that they weren't used to. And he wanted them to become just like the other Babylonians. Well, Daniel and his friends loved God, and they loved God and put him first above everything. And so even though they were in a brand new country, which probably was a little scary for them, and they were with this king, the king liked these guys, and he wanted them to do some important work for him, but he wanted to change everything about them. And so even though the king liked them, and they didn't want to make the king mad, because back in those days, you don't want to make a king very mad, but they loved God more. And so they asked the king's officials if they could not do all of the things that the king wanted his men to do. So first, Daniel asked if they could just eat the food that they were normally used to eat. You know, back then, God gave them a list of foods that he didn't want them to eat. And so Daniel wanted to honor God with his choices. And so he asked the king's men to put him to a test and to let him and his friends eat only the food that God told them to eat. And after 10 days, for the king's men to see how did David and his friends look compared to how the other guys who were eating the food the king wanted them to look. Well, after the 10 days, guess what? Daniel and his friends looked healthier and in better shape than all the other guys that had eaten the food that the king wanted Daniel and his friends to eat. You know, they put God first. Even in a situation where they're in a new environment, in a scary place, they still loved God and wanted to do what he wanted them to do. And because of that, God honored their choices and they were in better shape than the other guys. And so because of that, the king made them special, gave them special jobs and special roles. They were pretty high up in the king's kingdom. Well, today Pastor Kyle talked about another story that happened with Daniel. And actually Daniel in this story isn't mentioned. We're not sure if he was away on other business. Maybe he was doing other things for the king. But in this story, it's just Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That was the king's, remember, those were the new names that the king gave Daniel's friends. These friends did lots of work for the king. And one day the king decided to build a big statue out of gold. It says that it was 90 feet tall. That's a big statue, isn't it? And not only did the king build the statue, but he wanted everyone in his kingdom to bow down and worship this statue. Now, to everyone else, they were going to do what the king wanted, because the king could put them to death if they didn't do what he wanted and follow his rules. In fact, the king made the law that anyone who didn't bow would be thrown into a fiery furnace that would surely kill them. But Daniel's friends, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they loved God first. They knew that God loved them, they had a friendship with him, and that was most important to them, even if they could get in trouble with the king. You know, we have the Bible, so we know how this story ends. But think back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king had given them this law, and they didn't know that God was going to save them or take care of them. But they knew that they needed to make the choice that no matter what, they obeyed God, they trusted God, and they loved him and followed his laws. And God's law, if you guys remember back to Moses, the very first commandment is that you shall have no other gods before me. God wants us to love him the most. And so by bowing down to this other statue the king had made, that would make they would break that law, wouldn't they? They would be bowing down and worshiping something else besides God. And they knew that. And they wanted to put God first. And so they didn't know God was going to save them. In fact, their speech here, it says that they told the king, we're not going to bow down. And we believe that our God can save us. But even if he doesn't, we are still not going to bow down to your statue, king. Well, that made the king very angry, as you can imagine, because kings do not like being told no. They like people to obey their laws. And so the king decided to have this furnace, his punishment, heated 7 times hotter than normal. And he asked these guys to bind up the friends and throw them in the furnace. And do you know that the guys that bound up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and went to put them in the furnace, the fire was so hot that those guys died. And so into the furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went. They had no idea what God was going to do, but they weren't going to bow down to anything else besides God. They weren't going to love God, or they weren't going to love anything besides God. And so all of a sudden, King Nebuchadnezzar looked inside the furnace, and he said to his officials, he said, wait a minute, didn't we put 3 guys in the furnace? How come there are 4 in there walking around? Now, the Bible doesn't tell us who this 4th person that they saw is. Some think that it was an angel. Some think that it was Jesus. One day, hopefully, we'll get to ask God who exactly it was in there with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But nevertheless, inside that furnace, there weren't just 3 guys. There were 4. And the king called for those guys to be brought out of the furnace, and guess what? Not a hair of them on them was touched. Nothing was burned. Their clothes were fine. Their hair was fine. You know, they didn't even smell like smoke. That truly was a miracle, wasn't it? God had saved them. And because God had saved them, the king said, whoa, this God of yours is truly the only God. Now, the king doesn't go on to worship God, but he did take notice that day that our God must be the greatest God. You know, Daniel and his friends can teach us a couple things. There's so many lessons in the book of Daniel, and Daniel goes on, and his friends go on to have more things happen to them, more situations where they have to decide, are they going to put God first or are they not? So lots of other things happen. If you guys get a chance to look into Daniel, read the rest of the stories about them. We're going to talk about them here in the next couple weeks. I'll tell you more about that in a second. But just this one story of Daniel can teach us a couple things about our life today. You know, first, they got taken to a totally new place. Sometimes the things we go through are totally new, right? And it could have been a great excuse for them to forget about God. You know, he was the God back in their land. They could have forgotten about him. You know, when we go through hard times, it's tempting to forget about God, isn't it? Like all this uncertainty around us now, it's tempting for us to think, well, God doesn't know, what's going on, or he doesn't care about what's going on. So it's tempting to forget about God. But even though they were in a new place, God still was there with them, even if they couldn't see it. And they still made the choice to listen and love God first. They took their friendship with God really seriously. To them, it was the most important thing. And so it helps us to remind us, first, that no matter what happens to us, no matter where we go, our friendship with God needs to be number one, because it can help us through those bad times. No matter what happens to us, God is there. The second thing that Daniel and his friends can teach us is that we need to stand up for what's right, no matter what. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't have the Bible, so they didn't know that God was going to rescue them from the fiery furnace. They were prepared to die rather than say that God wasn't the greatest and bow down to something else that wasn't him. In our friendship with God, we need to make sure that we're standing up for what is right. We need to make sure that we're reading God's laws, his rules for us on how to have a good life, and that we're standing up for them. Because one, God's going to be there no matter what happens. And two, we never know if by seeing us stand up, somebody else is going to come to know about God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they did what was right, King Nebuchadnezzar, he took notice. He saw that, wow, their God must have been an amazing God to save them from that fiery furnace. People are watching us, guys, and they're looking at how we are reacting. Are we reacting with despair and negativity and sadness? It's okay to feel sadness, right? But are we showing others that there's hope, that there's love? God can help us through these things. How we react to situations, people are watching. And it might be those very ways that we're reacting to situations that happen in our lives, no matter what comes up. That might be the very thing that other people see God and they realize that he is amazing. And some people could come to know God because of what you do. So it's important to stand up for what is right, no matter what. And the last thing is that God will take care of us. God took care of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, didn't he? They had no idea he was going to do it, but he rescued them from the fiery furnace. And God always takes care of us. Now, does that mean that everything in this life is going to go perfectly for you if you have a friendship with God? Not even close. Because guys, there's still sin in this world. Until the day we get to see God face to face in heaven and live with him forever, where there'll be no more sin, no more sadness, no more junk, no more suffering. Until that day, there's still sin in this world. And so bad things are going to happen. But God is still there. And he's working it all out in ways that we can't see it. And he promises that he's going to help us. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we can promise that he's always going to be there. So when you go through rough times, keep remembering to ask God for help. And then look back and see how he has helped you in the things you've gone through. You might not have got the answers that you wanted, but his way and how he works things out is always the best. Sometimes how he answers them, the prayers that we have, are better than we could have even imagined ourselves. So remember, God will always help us, even if it doesn't look or feel like he's going to. He promises to always be there. And he was there for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And that is the same God that we have today. So we know that he will be with us too. So there's a lot of lessons that we learned just from Daniel and his friends today. And there are so many more in the stories coming up that we're going to read in the next few weeks. So August is all about Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so Pastor Kyle is going to be teaching on Sunday mornings at 10:30 about Daniel. And we are going to continue our video messages on Sundays about Daniel. Now, packet deliveries. For those of you who don't know what packets are, they're family discipleship tools with all kinds of activities about our messages that Pastor Kyle's doing, that I'm doing. That way, families, you guys can do them together or separately, whatever works for you. But they're little activities that reinforce the lessons that we're learning. It's great to learn these lessons about Daniel, right? But if we don't put them into practice in our life today, it's nothing more than head knowledge. So these activities that we've put together in these packets are designed to help you guys to learn these lessons and figure out how to apply them even today. How do they apply to your life? And it just helps take these lessons from the Bible to our everyday life and it gives us stuff to do together as a family at home, since we can't be together in person just yet. Well, these packets that we've been delivering have been every 2 weeks. This week, we're actually going to give you the whole packet for August because it's all about Daniel. So all of the activities will be together about Daniel. Our packets usually get delivered on Sundays, but this week we have something a little bit different. We're going to deliver them on Tuesday. So in 2 days, everyone who's signed up already for the packets will get those dropped off to their mailboxes or their front porches this Tuesday in the afternoon sometime. If you did not sign up for a packet already and you want one, you're curious about what the activities are, you just want to check it out, send us a message here on our Facebook page, Countryside FM Kids, or you can always send us an email to children@countrysidefm.org. So send us an email or drop us a message here if you didn't get a chance to sign up for those packets and you'd like one. It's never too late to get a packet. We're going to be continuing those packets until we can see each other, hopefully in person, or until God leads us to something else that He wants us to do. So the packets will still be coming in the weeks ahead. So I think that's an update about the packets and a little lesson on our friend Daniel and his friends. I hope that you guys have a great week. I hope that you get to soak up more of that sun, keep making those summer memories, enjoy your families and the time that you guys have together. And I just am praying for you guys. I miss you so, so much. I'm praying for you, especially as you guys decide what's happening with school. We know we're hearing school talks everywhere. So as your family prays about what to do, send you back in person or do online schooling, we are praying for you every single day. So we're just praying that you guys stay safe, stay healthy, and that you guys are growing in your friendships with God, even if we can't be together. Well, I hope you have a great one. I'm going to get outside and soak up some of this sun too while we have it. And I hope that you have a wonderful week. I'll see you guys very soon. Bye.